Welcome back, traveler. Last time, we raised our horns in the mead halls, drank with the gods, and learned just how central brewing was to Viking life. But our journey doesn't end with the clinking of cups and the roaring of feasts, because, in the Viking world, even death came with its own round of drinking. You've journeyed through the vibrant mead halls, delved into the secrets of Viking brewing, and even glimpsed the divine revelry of the gods. But life, even in the Viking age, is finite, and with death comes another profound and often very boozy ritual: the funeral feast. This wasn't a somber, quiet affair. It was a raucous celebration of life, a send-off for the departed, and a powerful reaffirmation of community bonds. And, as you might expect by now, alcohol played a central, almost sacred, role in ensuring the deceased had a well-lubricated journey to the afterlife. Imagine the scene. A chieftain has fallen, perhaps in battle, or simply from old age. The initial grief is profound, but soon preparations begin for the shaund, or funeral ale. This isn't just a wake. It's a multi-day event, a grand feast designed to honor the dead and to formally transfer power and property to the heirs. You see family members, friends, and allies gathering, not just to mourn, but to drink, to boast, and to ensure the deceased's legacy is properly celebrated. The air, usually thick with the scent of wood smoke and ale, now also carries the solemn aroma of burning pyres or freshly dug graves. It's a bittersweet symphony of sorrow and celebration, a powerful reminder that even in death, the Vikings found a reason to raise a horn. It's like a family reunion, but with more tears, more mead, and significantly higher stakes for the inheritance. Mainstream historical fact: funeral feasts, known as shaund, meaning seventh, or gravel grave ale, were crucial ceremonies in Viking society. These events, often held 7 days after a death, served multiple purposes: to honor the deceased, to mark the formal transfer of inheritance, and to reinforce social ties among the living. The consumption of large quantities of ale and mead was central to these rituals, symbolizing continuity, communal solidarity, and a proper send-off for the departed into the afterlife. One quirky tidbit about these funeral feasts is the belief that the deceased could still partake in the festivities. In some accounts, a special drinking horn or cup would be set aside for the departed, filled with their favorite brew and placed near their burial mound or pyre. It was a way to include them in the ongoing celebration, a final act of hospitality before their journey to the afterlife. Imagine the awkwardness if you accidentally drank from the deceased's horn. It's a powerful symbol of the Viking belief in a continuous connection between the living and the dead, a reminder that even in death, you're still part of the party. It's like leaving out cookies for Santa, but with more mead and a slightly higher chance of a ghostly visit. Historians still argue whether the elaborate nature of Viking funeral feasts was primarily driven by religious belief in the afterlife or by social and political necessity. Some scholars emphasize the spiritual aspect, arguing that the rituals, including the copious drinking, were essential for ensuring the deceased's successful passage to the other world, whether it be Valhalla, Folkvanga, or Hell. Others contend that the feasts were more about the living, serving as a public display of wealth and power, a means of solidifying alliances, and a formal declaration of the new chieftain or heir. It's a bit like debating whether a lavish wedding is about love or about showing off to the relatives. The truth, as often is the case, is likely a complex interplay of both, with spiritual beliefs providing the framework and social dynamics shaping the execution. The consumption of alcohol at these funerals wasn't just for merriment. It had a deeper, ritualistic significance. The act of sharing a drink, especially from a communal horn, reinforced the bonds between the living and the dead, and between the living themselves. It was a way to collectively process grief, to reaffirm the community's resilience, and to ensure that the memory of the departed lived on. The alcohol could also serve as a psychological aid, dulling the sharp edges of sorrow and allowing for a more uninhibited expression of emotion, whether it be laughter, tears, or boasts of the deceased's valor. It was a form of communal therapy, a liquid balm for the soul. Another light joke, I bet Viking funeral planners had a very specific set of challenges. Okay, so we need enough mead for 3 days, a long ship that can actually burn, and someone to make sure Uncle Ragnar doesn't try to fight the ghost of the deceased again. He always does that after too much ale. It's a tough job, but someone's got to do it. And imagine the cleanup crew after a 3-day Viking funeral feast. Probably needed a whole new set of ravens. The Shond was also a crucial legal event. It was at this feast that the inheritance was formally transferred, and the new head of the household or chieftain was publicly recognized. The drinking and feasting served as witnesses to these important transactions, making them binding in the eyes of the community. If you weren't there, if you didn't drink, your claim might be weakened. It was a very public, very boozy form of legal documentation. And in a society where oral tradition was paramount, the shared experience of the feast ensured that everyone remembered who was now in charge and who owned what. It was a testament to the power of communal memory, fueled by fermented beverages. So, as you stand amidst the revelry and solemnity of a Viking funeral feast, you realize that death, for these people, was not an end, but a transition. And alcohol, that golden thread woven through every aspect of their lives, was there to ease the passage, to honor the past, and to celebrate the continuity of life. It was a powerful reminder that even in the face of mortality, the Vikings found a reason to raise a horn, to sing a saga, and to ensure that the journey to the afterlife was as well lubricated as the journey through life. And as the echoes of their toasts fade into the night, you're left with a profound appreciation for a culture that truly knew how to send someone off in style, with enough mead to last eternity. Asterisk from the solemnity of funeral feasts to the divine revelry of Asgard, you've seen how deeply woven alcohol was into the fabric of Viking life. But beyond the individual events and personal consumption, there was a rhythm to their drinking, a grand, cyclical pattern dictated by the seasons and the agricultural year. For the Vikings, the turning of the year was marked by festivals, celebrations, and communal gatherings, and at the heart of almost every one of them was the flowing horn of mead or ale. So, let's immerse ourselves in the seasonal celebrations, where entire communities drank themselves into oblivion, not just for fun, but for survival, for community, and for the gods. Imagine the long, dark nights of winter, when the sun barely kisses the horizon. This was the time of Yule, the most important of the Viking festivals, a celebration of the winter solstice and the return of the sun. The mead halls, which might have seemed cavernous and cold in other seasons, now pulsed with warmth, light, and the joyous clamour of hundreds of voices. You'd see families gathered, sharing stories, exchanging gifts, and, of course, drinking copious amounts of Yule ale. This wasn't just a party. It was a desperate act of defiance against the encroaching darkness, a way to keep spirits high when the world outside was frozen and unforgiving. It's like your family's annual holiday gathering, but with more animal sacrifices and a higher chance of someone boasting about their latest raid. And probably better drinks. Mainstream historical fact: Yule Jail was a major winter festival. In pre-Christian Germanic and Norse cultures, typically celebrated around the winter solstice. It was a period of feasting, drinking, and ritual, intended to mark the darkest part of the year and welcome the return of the sun. The consumption of specially brewed Yule ale was a central component, often involving toasts to the gods, ancestors, and future prosperity. Many modern Christmas traditions, such as the Yule log and feasting, have roots in these ancient Norse celebrations. As the year progressed, other festivals punctuated the calendar. There were spring celebrations, marking the end of winter and the beginning of planting, where prayers and drinks were offered for a bountiful harvest. Then came the summer festivals, often held around the summer solstice, a time of light, growth, and outdoor gatherings. And finally, the harvest festivals, when the fruits of their labor were gathered, and the brewing vats were once again filled to the brim. These weren't just excuses to get drunk. They were vital communal events, reinforcing social bonds, expressing gratitude to the gods, and ensuring the continuity of their way of life. Each festival had its own rituals, its own songs, and its own particular type of ale or mead, brewed specifically for the occasion. It's like a year-long cycle of themed parties, each one more intoxicating than the last. One quirky tidbit about these seasonal celebrations is the concept of the BLT, a ritual sacrifice that often accompanied the feasting and drinking. While it might sound gruesome to modern ears, the BLT was a central part of their religious practice, a way to honor the gods and ensure their favor. Animals, and sometimes even humans, though this is debated and rare, would be sacrificed, and their blood might be sprinkled on altars or participants. Then, the meat from the sacrificed animals would be cooked and shared in the feast, and the ale or mead would be consecrated and drunk in honor of the gods. It was a full sensory experience, a communion with the divine that involved all aspects of their lives, from the sacred to the culinary. Imagine trying to explain that to your vegan friends at Thanksgiving dinner. Yes, we're honoring the harvest, and also there's a bit of blood involved. Historians still argue whether the primary purpose of these seasonal drinking festivals was religious devotion or social cohesion. Some scholars emphasize the spiritual aspect, arguing that the rituals and offerings were genuinely intended to appease the gods and secure good fortune for the community. Others contend that while religious elements were present, the festivals primarily served as crucial opportunities for social bonding, conflict resolution, and the reinforcement of communal identity in a largely decentralized society. It's a bit like debating whether people go to church for spiritual enlightenment or for the potluck afterward. The truth, as always, is likely a complex interplay, with the sacred and the social intertwined in a way that's difficult for modern minds to fully discern. The sheer scale of drinking at these festivals would have been staggering, with entire communities participating, and alcohol often being safer to drink than water. It was consumed in vast quantities. People would drink until they literally couldn't stand, often sleeping it off in the mead hall itself. It was a time of uninhibited revelry, where social norms might be relaxed and inhibitions lowered. This could lead to wild dancing, boisterous singing, and perhaps a few regrettable decisions. But it was also a time of deep camaraderie, of shared laughter, and of a profound connection to their cultural heritage. It's like a massive family reunion that lasts for days, where everyone gets a little too comfortable, and someone, inevitably, ends up telling embarrassing stories about their ancestors. Another light joke, I bet the Vikings had a special word for the feeling you get when you realize you have to go back to raiding after a week of non-stop Yule feasting. Probably something like Ragnar-level hangover. And imagine trying to explain to your chieftain why you accidentally pledged allegiance to a rival clan during a particularly enthusiastic toast. It seemed like a good idea at the time. Sir, the mead was strong, and their chieftain had a really nice beard. The communal aspect of these festivals was paramount. Everyone contributed, from the brewing of the ale to the preparation of the food. It was a collective effort, a shared responsibility that culminated in a shared experience of joy and intoxication. These festivals were also opportunities for storytelling, for the recitation of sagas and poems, and for the passing down of oral traditions. The alcohol, in a way, served as a social lubricant, loosening tongues and encouraging the flow of narratives that kept their history and mythology alive. It was a living, breathing library, powered by mead and ale. So, as you witness the vibrant tapestry of Viking seasonal celebrations, you realize that their drinking was far more than just a means to an end. It was a fundamental part of their cultural identity, a way to mark the passage of time, to honor their gods, and to strengthen the bonds that held their communities together. From the deepest winter to the brightest summer, the horn was always flowing, a constant reminder of their resilience, their joy, and their unwavering connection to the rhythms of the natural world. And as the echoes of their festive shouts fade into the night, you're left with a profound appreciation for a people who truly knew how to celebrate life, one intoxicating season at a time. Asterisk, you've experienced the communal warmth of the mead, whole, the sacred rituals of the sumble, and the sheer scale of seasonal celebrations. But now, let's delve into a more competitive, and sometimes perilous, aspect of Viking drinking. The games. These weren't your gentle parlor games. These were contests of endurance, wit, and often sheer capacity for alcohol, where the line between revelry and ruin was often blurred. And sometimes, the stakes were far higher than just bragging rights. They could be a matter of life and death. Imagine the scene. The feast is in full swing, the mead and ale flowing freely. The air is thick with laughter, boasts, and the occasional off-key singing. Suddenly, a challenge is issued. Perhaps it's a drinking contest, a test of who can drain the most horns without falling off their bench. Or maybe it's a game of riddles, where a wrong answer means another full horn. These weren't just casual dares. They were opportunities to prove your mettle, to enhance your reputation, and to demonstrate your resilience. You might see warriors, their eyes gleaming with competitive fire, pushing themselves to their limits, cheered on by their comrades. It's like a frat party, but with more axes, less concern for liver health, and a very real possibility of waking up in a ditch or worse. And unlike modern drinking games, where the worst outcome is usually a bad hangover and some embarrassing photos, in the Viking Age, the consequences could be far more severe. Mainstream historical fact: while detailed rules for specific Viking drinking games are scarce, sagas and historical accounts frequently describe competitive drinking as a feature of feasts and gatherings. These contests were not merely for entertainment, but served as a means of demonstrating physical endurance, mental fortitude, and social standing. The ability to hold one's liquor was often seen as a virtue, a sign of strength and control, even amidst the revelry. One quirky tidbit about these games is that they often involved more than just drinking. Some accounts suggest that riddles were a popular element, where participants would challenge each other with complex puzzles, and failure to answer correctly resulted in a penalty drink. Imagine trying to solve a cryptic riddle after several horns of mead. It's a true test of mental agility under duress. Other games might have involved feats of strength or even verbal duels where insults and boasts were exchanged, with the loser having to drink. It was a multifaceted form of entertainment, combining physical, mental, and social challenges, all lubricated by copious amounts of alcohol. It's like a medieval pub quiz, but with higher stakes and a much higher chance of someone getting offended and starting a brawl. Historians still argue whether the descriptions of extreme drinking and the potentially deadly outcomes of these games in sagas are literal accounts or literary exaggerations. Some scholars suggest that the sagas, being heroic narratives, might have embellished the drinking feats to emphasize the strength and resilience of their protagonists. Others contend that given the high alcohol content of some historical brews and the lack of modern understanding of alcohol's effects, such extreme consumption and its consequences were indeed possible. It's a bit like debating whether the stories of legendary strongmen are true or just tall tales. The truth, as always, probably lies somewhere in the middle, with a healthy dose of both reality and poetic license. The danger in these games wasn't just from alcohol poisoning, though that was certainly a risk. The lowered inhibitions and heightened emotions could easily lead to arguments, challenges, and ultimately, violence. A misplaced word, a perceived slight, or a drunken boast could escalate quickly, turning a friendly competition into a deadly brawl. Remember the symbol and the importance of carefully chosen words. Well, imagine that, but with everyone significantly more intoxicated. It's a recipe for disaster, or at least a very dramatic evening. And in a society where honor was paramount, a challenge issued in a drinking game could not be easily ignored, even if it was made in a drunken haze. Another light joke, I bet the Vikings had a special phrase for when someone was so drunk they started challenging inanimate objects to drinking contests. Probably something like, "He's trying to outdrink the longhouse post again." And then everyone would just nod knowingly, because they'd all been there, or seen someone there. It's a universal experience, really, just with different architectural features. The competitive nature of Viking society extended to almost every aspect of life, and drinking was no exception. From the battlefield to the mead hall, Vikings sought to prove their superiority, their strength, and their courage. Drinking games were just another arena for this display of prowess. The ability to consume vast quantities of alcohol without succumbing to its effects was a sign of a strong constitution, a testament to one's physical and mental toughness. It was a way to earn respect, to gain status, and to solidify your position within the social hierarchy. It was a liquid form of social climbing, with each drained horn a step up the ladder. So, as you witness the intensity of these Viking drinking games, you realize that they were far more than just frivolous entertainment. They were a reflection of a culture that valued strength, endurance, and a willingness to push boundaries, even at great personal risk. They were a microcosm of Viking society itself, where every action, even something as seemingly simple as drinking, could be imbued with deeper meaning and potentially deadly consequences. And as the shouts of the competitors echo through the hall, you're left with a profound appreciation for a people who truly lived life on the edge, even when they were just trying to have a good time. After all that feasting, all those toasts, and all those competitive drinking games, you're probably feeling a little rough. The mead hall, once a beacon of warmth and camaraderie, now seems to spin slightly, and the joyous clamour of last night has been replaced by a dull throb behind your eyes. Welcome, my friend, to the Viking hangover. And while we modern folk have our Gatorade and greasy breakfasts, the Vikings had their own unique, and often rather questionable, methods for battling the morning after misery. So, prepare yourself for a journey into the less glamorous side of Viking drinking, where the cures might just be worse than the affliction. Imagine waking up on a hard wooden bench, the lingering scent of stale mead and wood smoke clinging to your clothes. Your head feels like Thor's hammer has taken up residence inside it, and every sound is an assault on your ears. You stumble out into the crisp morning air, desperately seeking relief. What do? Well, if you were a Viking, your options were interesting. Forget the hair of the dog. They had remedies that ranged from the surprisingly sensible to the downright bizarre. It's like your grandma's old folk remedies, but with a distinct Norse twist, and probably less Vicks vapor. Mainstream historical fact, while direct evidence for specific Viking hangover cures is limited. Historical accounts and later folk traditions suggest that they likely employed a combination of rehydration, herbal remedies, and sometimes even more alcohol to alleviate the symptoms of excessive drinking. The concept of a morning after was certainly not new, and various cultures throughout history have developed their own methods for coping with the consequences of revelry. One quirky tidbit that often surfaces in discussions about Viking hangover cures involves drinking vinegar and water. Yes, you heard that right. Imagine your already churning stomach, recoiling at the thought of a sour, acidic concoction. The idea was likely that the vinegar would help to rebalance the body's humors or to counteract the sweetness of the mead. Whether it actually worked or just made you feel even more miserable is a matter of historical debate. But it certainly sounds like a punishment for last night's excesses, doesn't it? It's like being told to run a marathon after a night of heavy drinking, technically possible, but why would you do that to yourself? Historians still argue whether the Vikings had a systematic approach to hangover remedies or if their methods were largely anecdotal and varied widely from region to region. Some scholars suggest that their understanding of herbal medicine and their practical approach to life would have led to effective, if simple, cures. Others contend that the concept of a hangover cure, as we understand it, might have been less formalized, with people simply enduring the discomfort as a natural consequence of their feasting. It's a bit like debating whether your friend's secret hangover cure actually works, or if it's just a placebo effect combined with the passage of time. The truth is probably a mix of both, with some remedies offering genuine relief, and others being more about tradition than efficacy. Beyond the vinegar, other potential remedies might have included hearty, fatty foods, much like our modern greasy breakfasts. Think roasted meats, stews, and plenty of bread. The idea here is to line the stomach, absorb the remaining alcohol, and replenish lost nutrients. And given the physical demands of Viking life, a good meal would have been essential for recovery. You might also find them turning to various herbs known for their medicinal properties, perhaps brewed into teas or mixed with water. Things like willow bark for pain relief, or various digestive aids. It's a more natural approach than popping a modern painkiller, but probably less immediate in its effects. And let's be honest, after a night of mead, you're probably not in the mood for a delicate herbal infusion. Another light joke. You know, I bet the Vikings had a special prayer for their livers. Something like, Odin, grant me strength, for I have sinned against my internal organs. And imagine the shame of being the first one to admit defeat to a hangover. I, Bjorn the brave, conqueror of lands and slayer of beasts, am defeated by a headache. And the sun is too bright. It's a humbling experience, even for a Viking. Of course, the most common cure for a hangover, then as now, was probably simply more alcohol. The hair of the dog approach, where a small amount of the same beverage is consumed to ease the withdrawal symptoms, is a time-honored tradition across many cultures. A light ale in the morning might have seemed like a good idea, just to take the edge off. But as we all know, this often just postpones the inevitable, leading to a longer, more drawn-out recovery. It's a vicious cycle, one that the Vikings were likely very familiar with, and given the constant availability of ale, it would have been a tempting, if ultimately self-defeating, strategy. So, as you nurse your throbbing head and contemplate the questionable wisdom of ancient hangover cures, you realize that some things never change. The joy of a good party is often followed by the regret of the morning after. But even in their suffering, the Vikings found ways to cope, to endure, and to prepare themselves for the next feast, the next raid, the next grand adventure. And as the sun slowly climbs higher, and the world gradually stops spinning, you're left with a profound appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit, even when it's severely dehydrated, and perhaps a newfound respect for modern medicine. Just a little bit. You've survived the Viking hangover, a testament to your resilience, or perhaps your sheer stubbornness. But now, let's delve into a realm where the consequences of too much mead could extend far beyond a throbbing head. The Viking legal system. In a society that valued honor, reputation, and communal order above all else, what happened when intoxication led to a breach of those values? Was being drunk a valid excuse for your actions, or did it just dig you a deeper hole? Prepare to navigate the murky waters of Viking law, where a tipsy tongue could land you in serious trouble, or, surprisingly, even offer a strange kind of defense. Imagine a local thing, the Viking assembly where laws were made and disputes were settled. The air is crisp, the ground firm beneath your feet, a stark contrast to the swirling chaos of your morning after memories. You see chieftains, free farmers, and legal experts gathered, their faces serious as they listen to accusations and defenses. Someone has committed an offense, perhaps a brawl broke out at a feast, or property was damaged in a drunken stupor. The question now is, how does the law and the community deal with a crime committed under the influence? It's like a court hearing, but with more beards, less formal attire, and a much higher chance of someone challenging the verdict to a duel. And probably no lawyers, which, depending on your perspective, could be a good or bad thing. Mainstream historical fact: while Viking law codes did not explicitly define intoxication as a complete defense, the state of mind of the accused, including their level of sobriety, could be a mitigating factor in legal judgments. Disputes arising from drunken behavior were often handled through a system of fines, compensation, and sometimes public shaming rather than imprisonment. The emphasis was on restoring balance to the community and compensating the injured party, rather than purely on punishment. One quirky tidbit is that in some sagas, characters intentionally get others drunk to manipulate them or to extract information. This suggests that while drunkenness might have been seen as a state of diminished responsibility, it was also recognized as a vulnerability that could be exploited. Imagine being accused of something you said or did while completely inebriated, only to find out you were set up. It's a reminder that even in the Viking Age, people understood the power of a loosened tongue. It's like a medieval spy movie. But instead of truth serum, they just used a lot of mead, and probably a very convincing smile. Historians still argue whether the Viking legal system viewed drunkenness as a legitimate excuse for criminal behavior or merely as an explanation for it. Some scholars suggest that while it might not have absolved a person of guilt entirely, it could reduce the severity of the punishment, particularly if the act was not premeditated. Others argue that personal responsibility was paramount and that choosing to become intoxicated did not excuse subsequent actions. It's a bit like debating whether a modern court should be lenient on someone who committed a crime while drunk. The answer is complex and likely varied depending on the specific circumstances, the nature of the offense, and the reputation of the individual involved. After all, a chieftain's drunken brawl might be viewed differently than a thrall's. The consequences of drunken behavior could range from minor fines to serious blood feuds. If you insulted someone's honor while drunk, you might have to pay a fine, or worse, face a challenge. If you accidentally killed someone in a drunken rage, the consequences would be severe, potentially leading to outlawry or a blood feud that could engulf entire families. The community, through the thing, would act as judge and jury, weighing the evidence and determining the appropriate compensation or punishment. It was a system built on communal consensus and the maintenance of social order, even when that order was disrupted by too much ale. It's a reminder that even in a seemingly wild and untamed society, there were rules, and those rules had teeth. Another light joke. I bet the Viking equivalent of a public defender was just a really good storyteller, who could spin a tale about how the accused was clearly under the influence of mischievous spirits, or perhaps a particularly potent batch of mead. My client, honorable judges, was not himself. The mead, it spoke to him. It told him to redecorate the chieftain's longhouse with a battle axe. It's all about framing the narrative, isn't it? The sagas are filled with examples of legal disputes arising from drunken incidents. Characters often find themselves in trouble after a night of heavy drinking, leading to brawls, insults, and even killings. These narratives highlight the tension between the communal joy of feasting and the potential for chaos that alcohol could unleash. They also serve as cautionary tales, reminding listeners of the importance of self-control, even in the midst of revelry. It's a bit like your parents telling you stories about their wild college days, but with more swords and less regrettable tattoos. So, as you observe the legal proceedings unfold, you realize that even in their approach to justice, the Vikings were pragmatic. They understood the human tendency towards excess, especially when mead was flowing. While they didn't necessarily excuse drunken behavior, they recognized it as a factor, and their legal system sought to restore balance and prevent escalating feuds. It was a system designed for a society where communal drinking was a way of life, and where the occasional drunken mishap was an almost inevitable consequence. And as the verdict is delivered and the fines are paid, you're left with a profound appreciation for a legal system that, despite its differences, still grappled with the timeless question of responsibility, even when the accused was a little too tipsy to remember what they did. Asterisk, you've navigated the legal complexities of Viking intoxication, and perhaps you're breathing a sigh of relief that your drunken antics wouldn't necessarily land you in a blood feud. But now, let's turn our attention to a force that would profoundly reshape not just Viking drinking culture, but their entire way of life, the arrival of Christianity. This wasn't a sudden conversion. It was a gradual, often complex process. and it brought with it new ideas about morality, sin, and the proper role of alcohol. So, prepare to witness a cultural clash, where the sacred mead hall traditions met the solemn rituals of the church, and the future of Viking drinking hung in the balance. Imagine the scene. A missionary, perhaps a monk from a distant land, stands before a group of Vikings, attempting to explain the tenets of a new faith. He speaks of a single God, of sin and salvation, and perhaps of moderation. This is a stark contrast to the polytheistic, boisterous world you've come to know, where gods drank freely and feasts were a pathway to the divine. The initial encounters were often through trade and raids, where Vikings encountered Christian communities and their customs. Over time, as trade routes expanded and settlements were established in Christian lands, the influence grew. It's like trying to introduce kale smoothies to a group of people who've only ever known mead and roasted boar. There's going to be some resistance, and a lot of confused looks. Mainstream historical fact: the conversion of the Vikings to Christianity was a gradual process that spanned several centuries, beginning with early contacts through trade and raids and culminating in widespread adoption by the TH and TH centuries. This conversion brought significant changes to many aspects of Norse society, including their religious practices, social customs, and, inevitably, their relationship with alcohol. While pagan feasts often involved ritualistic drinking and offerings to multiple gods, Christian practices emphasized temperance and a different form of communal gathering. One quirky tidbit is that while Christian missionaries often preached against excessive drinking and pagan revelry, they also brought with them new brewing techniques and, crucially, the cultivation of grapes for wine. Monasteries, in particular, became centers of brewing and viticulture, producing high-quality alcoholic beverages for both religious ceremonies and sustenance. So, in a strange twist of fate, the very force that sought to temper Viking drinking habits also introduced new and improved ways of producing alcohol. It's like your doctor telling you to cut back on sugar, but then handing you a recipe for a delicious new cake. Confusing, right? Historians still argue whether the Christian emphasis on moderation significantly curtailed Viking drinking habits, or if the existing cultural importance of alcohol simply adapted to the new religious framework. Some scholars suggest that the Church's teachings led to a more restrained approach to consumption, particularly in formal religious contexts. Others argue that the deep-seated traditions of feasting and communal drinking were too strong to be easily eradicated, and that Christian holidays often simply replaced pagan festivals as occasions for continued revelry, albeit with a new spiritual justification. It's a bit like debating whether people go to church for spiritual enlightenment or for the potluck afterward. The truth, as always, is likely a complex interplay, with the sacred and the social intertwined in a way that's difficult for modern minds to fully disentangle. The shift wasn't just about what they drank, but why and how. The pagan BLT, with its ritualistic drinking and animal sacrifices, gradually gave way to Christian feasts and sacraments. Wine, which had been a luxury import, gained new symbolic significance in the Eucharist. The communal aspect of drinking remained, but the context changed. Instead of toasting Odin, they might now be toasting saints or the new king. The mead hall, while still a social hub, might have seen its religious significance diminish, replaced by the church as the primary spiritual center. It was a slow, subtle transformation, like trying to change the course of a mighty river with a single stone. The river still flows, but its direction is subtly altered. Another light joke. You know, I bet some of the first Christian converts among the Vikings were a little confused. So, you're telling me we can still drink, but now it's about the blood of Christ, not the blood of a giant. And we can't get too drunk. This sounds less fun, but the wine is pretty good, I guess. It's all about finding the silver lining, even in religious conversion. The long-term impact of Christianity on Viking drinking culture was profound. While the love for mead and ale never truly disappeared, the wild, uninhibited revelry of the pagan era gradually softened. Laws were introduced that regulated brewing and consumption, and the church actively promoted temperance. The emphasis shifted from heroic intoxication to more controlled, socially acceptable forms of drinking. It was a move towards a more ordered, more civilized society, one where the consequences of drunkenness were more clearly defined and less likely to lead to a blood feud. It was a slow domestication of the wild spirit of the North, a process that continues to this day. So, as you witness the cross being raised alongside the hammer of Thor, and the sound of church bells begins to mingle with the echoes of ancient sagas, you realize that the age of Vikings and its unique drinking culture is slowly fading. The golden age of uninhibited revelry is giving way to a new era, one shaped by different beliefs and different values. But even as the old ways recede, the spirit of the mead hall, the love for a good brew, and the deep human need for communal celebration will endure, transformed but never truly extinguished. And as the last rays of the setting sun illuminate the changing landscape, you're left with a profound understanding of how even something as seemingly simple as a drink can reflect the grand sweep of history and the enduring power of cultural transformation. Asterisk, you've witnessed the grand sweep of Viking drinking culture, from the primal roar of the berserker to the solemnity of funeral feasts, and even the subtle shifts brought by the cross. Now, as our journey through the intoxicating past draws to a close, let's fast forward through the centuries and trace the enduring legacy of these ancient traditions. For while the longships may have vanished from the waves and the mead halls are now archaeological sites, the spirit of Viking drinking, in surprising and often delightful ways, continues to flow through modern Scandinavian alcohol customs. So, let's raise a final horn to the past and see how the echoes of ancient revelry still resonate in the present day. Imagine yourself in a modern Scandinavian country, perhaps Sweden, Norway, or Denmark. You're at a festive gathering, maybe a midsummer celebration or a Christmas party. What do you see? People raising glasses, singing songs, and sharing toasts. Does it feel familiar? It should. The communal aspect of drinking, the importance of shared celebration, and the ritual of the toast are direct descendants of those ancient Viking feasts. While the beverages might have changed from raw mead to aquavit or schnapps, the underlying social function remains remarkably similar. It's like seeing your great-grandparents' favorite dance moves pop up in a TikTok video, slightly different, but undeniably the same spirit. Mainstream historical fact: many modern Scandinavian drinking customs, such as the emphasis on communal toasting, skalds, the consumption of strong spirits like aquavit during festive occasions, and the tradition of singing drinking songs, can be directly traced back to the social and ritualistic drinking practices of the Viking Age, while the specific drinks and contexts have evolved. The underlying cultural significance of alcohol as a social lubricant and a marker of celebration has persisted for over a millennium. One quirky tidbit is the enduring popularity of mead itself. While it might not be the everyday beverage it once was, mead has experienced a significant resurgence in popularity, both in Scandinavia and globally. Craft meaderies are popping up, experimenting with new flavors and techniques, but always with a nod to its ancient origins. You can find mead served at historical reenactments, in specialty bars, and even on the shelves of your local supermarket. It's a testament to the timeless appeal of honey wine, a liquid bridge connecting us directly to the tastes of the Viking age. It's like your favorite band from high school suddenly becoming popular again, and you can say, "I knew them before they were cool." Historians still argue whether the modern emphasis on moderation in Scandinavian drinking culture is a direct result of Christian influence or a more recent development driven by public health initiatives. Some scholars suggest that the long history of heavy communal drinking in the region created a need for later societal controls and a shift towards more responsible consumption. Others argue that the core values of hospitality and community, inherited from the Viking Age, have always been balanced by an underlying understanding of the dangers of excess, even if not always perfectly adhered to. It's a bit like debating whether your New Year's resolution to eat healthier is because you genuinely want to or because your doctor told you to. The truth is probably a mix of both, with cultural evolution playing a significant role. The tradition of the skull toast is perhaps the most direct and visible link to the Viking past. When you raise your glass and say, "Skull," in Scandinavia, you are echoing a practice that dates back to the mead halls. It's more than just a polite gesture. It's a moment of connection, of shared intent, and often a brief moment of eye contact that acknowledges the bond between drinkers. This ritualistic element, so central to the Viking symbol, continues to bind people together, creating a sense of camaraderie and shared experience. It's a powerful reminder that some traditions are so fundamental to human connection that they transcend time and cultural shifts. Another light joke, you know. I bet if a Viking warrior time-traveled to a modern Scandinavian pub, they'd be a little confused by the small glasses and the lack of spontaneous poetry recitations. Where are the boasts? Where are the sagas? And why is everyone looking at their tiny glowing rectangles? But then they'd probably discover the aquavit, and all would be forgiven. Because some things, like strong spirits, are universally appreciated. The evolution of brewing techniques also carries the legacy of the Vikings. While modern breweries use stainless steel tanks and precise temperature controls, the fundamental ingredients, barley, water, and yeast remain the same. And in many rural areas, particularly in Norway, traditional farmhouse brewing methods, passed down through generations, still exist, using local ingredients and unique yeast strains that might have roots stretching back to the Viking Age. These are living traditions, tangible links to the ancient art of transforming grain and honey into liquid gold. It's like finding a secret family recipe for something delicious and realizing it's been perfected over 1,000 years. Even the design of modern drinking vessels sometimes harks back to the Viking era. While drinking horns are now largely ceremonial or novelty items, their iconic shape and the act of raising them high remain powerful symbols. Many modern beer steins and tankards, with their sturdy construction and generous capacity, carry a faint echo of the robust drinking vessels that once graced the Viking feast tables. It's a subtle homage, a quiet acknowledgement of the enduring influence of those ancient drinking traditions on our contemporary culture. So, as you reflect on this long and winding journey through the intoxicating history of the Vikings, you realize that their legacy isn't just in the sagas or the archaeological F-ins. It's in the clinking of glasses at a modern celebration, in the shared laughter over a pint of ale, and in the enduring human need for connection, camaraderie, and a good, strong drink. The Vikings may be gone, but their spirit, in a very real and liquid sense, lives on. And as the last echoes of their revelry fade, you're left with a profound appreciation for how deeply intertwined our present is with their past, and how a simple drink can tell a story that spans 1,000 years. Asterisk now, dim the light, maybe. Turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. As the last echoes of the mead hall fade into the quiet of the night, and the distant clinking of horns becomes a gentle whisper, allow your mind to drift. The journey through the Viking Age, with its boisterous feasts and solemn rituals, its fierce warriors and wise women, has come to its peaceful conclusion. You've seen how deeply woven alcohol was into the very fabric of their lives, a thread connecting them to their gods, their community, and their own adventurous spirit. Feel the warmth of the stories settle around you, like a soft, comforting blanket. The world of the Vikings, once so vibrant and alive, now gently recedes, leaving behind only the faintest scent of wood smoke and honey. There's no need to rush, no need to worry about the morning's battles or the next great raid. Just let the images soften, the sounds quiet, and the thoughts slow. You are safe, you are warm, and the echoes of history are now a lullaby, guiding you gently towards a peaceful slumber. Rest now, knowing that even in the deepest past, there was always a place for shared joy, for camaraderie, and for the simple comfort of a well-earned drink. Let the ancient spirits of the North watch over you as you drift into the quiet depths of sleep. Sweet dreams, my friend, sweet dreams.